is a short horror film by the online production company Bloody Cuts and is directed by Ben Tillett and Jake Cudahy. The film was exhibited on YouTube, Vimeo, shorthorrorflix.com and on the Bloody Cuts own website. The film is described as a fairy tale short horror film, as the film is entirely narrated through a voiceover and of course has fairy tale elements to it such as the inclusion of a monster, a curse, an evil witch-like stepmother, etc. The film is set in an old mansion, presumably set in around the 1800s, and entails an old stepmother putting a curse on her stepdaughter that if she suck her thumb again, the Suckablood will come and slaughter her. However, the Suckablood comes, but as the child is not sucking her thumb, it leaves her alone. However, the child goes downstairs to discover that the Suckablood has killed the stepmother, who was, as it seems, sucking her own thumb. Let's get into the analysis. Okay. At 0 seconds, the company logos appear, accompanied by ambient diegetic sound of a lightning storm and the moaning of wind. At 21 seconds, the addition of the diegetic sound of crows squawking and a non-diegetic orchestral score come in as the title Suckablood appears through the silhouette of tree branches against a full moon in the background. The camera then tilts and peds down whilst tracking to the right to a large mansion surrounded by a graveyard, of course foreshadowing a miserable demise for one of the characters. The sky and overall colouring of the shot is very grey and thus looks dreary and quite eerie, again very conventional of the horror genre. The male voiceover then comes in with, "On a dark stormy night the Suckablood comes," which of course, along with the dark stormy setting, foreshadows the Suckablood's coming. At 57 seconds, small Tilly is in a shot at a medium close-up sucking her thumb, holding a doll and is lit by the glow of the fire. This connotes that Tilly is an innocent character, confirming the stereotype that young girls are vulnerable and naive. However, in the background out of focus can be seen the stepmother's silhouette, only lit by the moonlight and occasionally the light from a lightning strike. This of course connotes that the stepmother is a powerful but evil character, which is a stereotypical representation of stepmothers in fairy tales. At 1 minute 4, the camera is at a low angle shot of the stepmother, who is caning Tilly, looking angry, and the cane strikes are paralleled with the diegetic sound of a lightning strike. This connotes that the stepmother is very powerful again, but very cruel. This subverts the stereotype of mother figures and carers being kind and caring towards their children. In contrast, at 1 minute 11, we are given a high angle shot of Tilly looking sadly at her bloodied hands, connoting that she is in pain but is weak and thus unable to do anything about it, confirming the stereotype that young girls are weak and are under the control of their elders. This idea is then confirmed with a medium close-up of the stepmother's finger in shallow focus pointing to the camera, and assumedly Tilly, and the focus then being pulled to a medium close-up of her face, whilst the camera tracks forward to a big close-up of the stepmother's face. At 1 minute 32, the camera peds down from a large window displaying the bleak and lightning-stricken sky, past an out-of-focus banister in the foreground with a rat running across it, with the addition of the diegetic sound of a rat squeaking, and then tilts down to a high angle of Tilly walking up the stairs with a candle in hand. This connotes that Tilly is overwhelmed by how large the house is and feels afraid, confirming the stereotype that young girls are vulnerable and weak. As Tilly walks down the corridor at 1 minute 48, the camera is tilted and continues to slowly tilt in different directions as Tilly looks around with a frightened expression. There are then multiple shot reverse shots of large animal heads on the walls, and the shot cutting back to Tilly, who looks frightened. This connotes that Tilly's imagination plays tricks on her in the house, and the things she thinks she sees frightens her, confirming the stereotype that young girls have vivid imaginations and are easily afraid. Then, at 2 minutes 12, the camera is at a high angle as Tilly walks up a spiral staircase. This high angle shot allows the audience to see that the stairs are bare wood and narrow, connoting that this is an underdeveloped part of the house, presumably the servants' quarters, and thus allows the audience to realise how badly the stepmother is treating Tilly. The high angle further connotes that Tilly is powerless and weak, confirming the stereotype that young girls are vulnerable. Once Tilly is in bed, there is a shot at 2 minutes 26, in which a lit candle is in focus, and Tilly is behind it, out of focus, but the candle goes out and the focus is pulled to Tilly, looking at the candle frightened, as a glow from a lightning bolt lights up her face, and the diegetic sound of lightning crashing can be heard. At 2 minutes 37, we see a shot of the blanket above Tilly as a non-diegetic voiceover says, "Tilly crave comfort." The camera then continues to ped down past Tilly and then past the mattress until the screen is dark. This connotes that although Tilly craves comfort and feels as though she is comforted by her covers, the dark force of the Suckablood is still lurking and the covers will not stop it. This confirms the stereotype of the antagonist not letting anything get in the way of their evil objectives, and also confirms the stereotype of young girls being naive. Then, at 2 minutes 55, the hands of the Suckablood appear from the dark space underneath the bed, gripping the frame, and the camera tracks backwards as the Suckablood reveals his face from underneath the bed. Meanwhile, we hear a loud, non-diegetic orchestral score of high-pitched strings. This connotes that the Suckablood is a force or being to be feared, and thus the stereotype that the antagonist is scary is confirmed. At 3 minutes 9, Tilly is at a medium close-up with her eyes closed, looking terrified, whilst the shot is tilted and continues to tilt, whilst the Suckablood slowly comes nearer Tilly, its red eyes glowing in the dark. The Suckablood then moves backwards until it can no longer be seen, and the camera then tilts in the opposite direction, slowly becoming upright again, until he opens her eyes as the diegetic sound of a door creaking open can be heard. This connotes that the Suckablood is being a mystery and fantasy, and also could connote that Tilly is possibly trying to tell herself that she is dreaming and willing herself to fall asleep. This confirms the stereotype that children are imaginative, but subverts the stereotype that children are weak and dependent on older people, as Tilly has to help herself due to the care from her stepmother evidently being non-existent. There are then multiple shot reverse shots at 3 minutes 32, as Tilly peers over her blanket and looks right, at which point it cuts to a shot of a window in which she was previously scared by a tree monster, but whom is now asleep, and then after it cuts back to Tilly again looking left. The shot cuts to a shot of the fireplace until the camera tilts down to mimic Tilly's gaze, and reveals the black footprints of the Suckablood on the carpet. This connotes that the threat that Tilly faced from the Suckablood is no longer present, and that she is safe for the time being. Then at 3 minutes 44, we see a medium close-up of Tilly's body as she climbs out of her duvet, and the camera tracks to the right to follow her. It then simultaneously heads down, and the shot is sped up whilst a loud, high-pitched, non-diegetic orchestral score is heard, and the camera stops at Tilly's face looking underneath the bed, out of focus, and dripping gunk, presumably from the Suckablood, in the foreground. This connotes that Tilly wants to make sure that she wasn't dreaming and making sure that the Suckablood has gone, subverting the stereotype that children are afraid, as Tilly clearly shows bravery. At 4 minutes 9, the camera slowly tracks to the left as Tilly creeps down the stairs, with the banister in the foreground out of focus and with the Suckablood's footprints visible on the stairs. In addition, the take is a long one, and thus we can connote that Tilly is cautious and afraid, as she feels as though the Suckablood is watching her and is lurking in the shadows. This confirms the stereotype that young children are afraid of monsters and other things they cannot see, and that children are also naive. At 4 minutes 46, there is a sound bridge of the voice-over from the previous shot, with the narrator saying, "For there lay her mother." At the same time, a diegetic lightning crash can be heard, and a flash of lightning lights up the stepmother's bloodied face with her thumb in her mouth. The camera then tracks to the right, moving behind Tilly, whilst the narrator says, "On the wall were written my words." And once the camera becomes stationary on a wall with writing on it, the narrator repeats what is written, ending with the line, "So I've taken your mum." This connotes that the stepmother was in fact sucking her thumb and has been killed by the Suckablood, subverting the stereotype that adults are mature and also subverting the stereotype that adults are wise. We then realise a twist in the tale, realising the narrator has been the Suckablood all along. After this shot, there is a big close-up of the dead stepmother at 5 minutes 2, their thumb in her mouth, covered in blood, and eyes roll backwards. The comical yet dark twist at the end of the film appeals to the sophisticated niche audience that will be viewing this product. However, the fairy tale-like narrative and style of the film would appeal to this audience in the way that it allows their creative and more childlike side to be explored, and the needs of this gratified. There were many parts of this film that we really liked and were inspired by. I especially loved the lighting, with the flashes of lightning coming through the windows, lighting up the characters, as I felt this allowed characters to appear more powerful at times, especially with the stepmother at the beginning of the film, yet it also emphasised important or particular frightening moments. However, I think this may be too much of a challenge for our film. We were also inspired by the different camera angles used and how they often show Tilly's inferiority and weakness as a young girl and the stepmother's power and authority over Tilly, and thought we could use this idea in order to create the sense of authority that the lady of the house has over the maid and the maid's inferiority. Furthermore, we were interested in how the shot types enhance the character's feelings, especially with Tilly, as she is often shown at a medium close-up when it can be assumed she's afraid. I especially love the tilted shots as they really emphasise Tilly's fear came from her imagination, with her mind playing tricks on her, causing her to feel afraid. This then allowed us as the audience to question if what Tilly is experiencing is reality or her imagination. This would be a great thing to bear in mind as we develop our own short film, as conventionally there is little dialogue in a short film and the characters have to be explored visually through mise-en-scène, etc. The frequent use of close-ups and medium close-ups gave the film a claustrophobic feeling, connoting that Tilly is unable to escape her fear, the authority of her stepmother and the Suckablood. However, this would be an excellent thing to take forward into our film, as we want to create the claustrophobic feel, with the connotations of the maid being unable to escape her role as a servant, unable to leave the house, and unable to escape the power of the lady of the house. We were also inspired by the use of a non-diegetic orchestral score, as it helped to add to the tense and fearful atmosphere of the film.